All right, we've still got some more people trickling in, but we've got about 25, 26 people on the line. And so I think it's enough of a critical mass to go ahead and get started, at least on some of the chapter updates. So now that we have more people on the line, again, welcome. This is the ASBPA Central Gulf Coast Chapter Lunch and Learn for October. And our speaker is the always wonderful Aaron Rooney of HDR Engineering. And Aaron's got a great presentation for us today. Talk about their award-winning project in Lake Pontchartrain. And this project was one of 5 that won a Best Restored Shore Award for 2023. And it was announced at the National Coastal Conference in Providence, Rhode Island, just a couple of short weeks ago. So a couple quick updates just to orient everybody before we pass the baton over to Aaron. Very short recap of the National Coastal Conference from Providence a couple of weeks ago. It was the biggest ASBPA conference ever in the history of the organization, which is really saying something because this was the 98th year of the organization. So in 2 more years, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary. And while there haven't necessarily been 98 national coastal conferences, there have been a lot and a lot of really exciting places. And the one in Providence, Rhode Island set a new bar. We had 425 attendees. Those were real attendees in person, not just registrations. That's actually who showed up and got a name tag. That is by far the largest in-person conference attendance ever. So that is really setting the bar high for future conferences. Obviously, the next thing on the agenda for the national organization is the Coastal Summit that's always held in Washington, D.C. That's in the spring. It's Coastal Week in D.C., so there's going to be a lot of coastal advocacy going on that week. Even though lawmakers may not actually be there, their staffers will. The reason why is that the Friday of that week is Good Friday. So they will be out of session, but staffers will be there. And you might find some elected officials still wandering around the Capitol. But for the most part, if you want to meet with representatives from your state or from an area or with an agency, we're going to want to make sure that they will actually be there that week ahead of time. So we are going to pass along more information on that for the people that intend to go to DC for that week. So we can do a little pre-work on getting people assigned or attached to either the virtual agency visits or in-person visits on the Hill to meet with staffers and to try and work through some of the logistics of how that's going to work, what it's going to look like, where to go, who to talk to, when to be there. Because for a lot of the first timers, that can be a little overwhelming. It can be overwhelming even for the seasoned people. But that is the next thing on the agenda for the national organization. So if you've never been to a summit before and you want to learn a little bit more about the policy side and the advocacy side of what the organization does, I highly recommend attending that week. It is a great week to be in DC. Cherry blossoms should be blooming. All of your coastal friends and family will be there. All the organizations across the United States having anything to do with coastal issues will likely be in DC that week. So it's a good time to have meetings, catch up with people, and also it's in the conference. Then later in that year, but a lot earlier than usual, will be the Coastal Summit, the National Coastal Conference. And it's a full, almost 2 months earlier in 2024. It'll be the last week of August in Galveston, Texas, at the Hilton Galveston Island Resort. And the reason why it's so early is that ASBPA had already signed a contract with the resort for the second week of October. But then we learned pretty much about the same time they signed the contract that the Restore America's Estuaries Summit is going to be that second week of October in DC. And we know there's a lot of crossover attendance, between the two conferences and organizations. So instead of trying to compete with Restore America's Estuaries, ASBPA got together with the Hilton Galveston Island Resort and asked for other potential open dates to, maintain the contract. And the last week of August was the only other option. So that's going to be interesting for a couple different reasons. Number one, we're going to be going to the Gulf Coast in the middle of hurricane season, always fun. Number two, It is going to be at the tail end of people's vacations, summer vacations, or the beginning of going back to school. It is also the week right before Labor Day weekend. As a result of that pending holiday, the entire conference schedule is being moved up earlier in the week. So typically the conference doesn't get started until Wednesday at noon and ends on Friday at noon, and everything's being pushed up a day. So the short courses are going to be on Monday. The board meeting will be Tuesday morning. Tuesday noon-ish, we'll start the plenaries, and we'll have the rest of the day on Tuesday, full day of technical sessions on Wednesday, half day on Thursday, probably a field trip, although that's still TBD. But then the goal is to get everybody out of there on Thursday or Thursday night ahead of the holiday crowd, or hoping that people might actually stay on the island for the weekend and have a long weekend for Labor Day as well. So that's kind of all the news that's fit to print from the national organization. Other updates I'll pass along as they come out, as we do by email. If anybody else has a project that they would like to talk about, or anything coastal related that's appropriate for ASBPA as an organization, we still can fit you in for November or December lunch and learn. But next year, we want to try to start getting the crew back together for some in-person events across all 3 states. We'll continue to do some of these virtual things just for continuing education purposes and to allow people to kind of engage and connect with other people in the organization, but also some technical content, and also get those nice free PDH hours that everybody loves. But we do want to start bringing people back together for some targeted events sometime next year. So be on the lookout for that. I have been talking long enough, and we have more people on the line now. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can pass the baton over to Erin. And Erin is going to take over and give us her presentation.
All right, great, thanks. All right, so I'm missing my presenter view. 1 second. Technical difficulties. All right. All right, is everything good to go on the audio visual side over there?
Yep, audio is loud and clear. We're looking at your slides. Move your cursor real quick, make sure we got that too. Yep, got it.
All right.
You're good to go, Erin.
Perfect. All right, and then I got a little thing on my end. Okay, there we go. Perfect. All right, great. So thanks everybody for joining. We're really excited to talk about this project. So this is the Lake Pontchartrain breakwater in Tangipahoa Parish. You know, there's several breakwaters in the lake at the moment. And so just to kind of preview, at the top we have a during construction photo, and at the bottom we have a 6 years post-construction photo, and you can see the not only the land growth, but the vegetative growth that has you know, has joined. And so let's see. All right, so for folks not super familiar with South Louisiana, we do have on the bottom here in New Orleans, the Mississippi River. On the right we have Lake Bourne, which opens out to the Gulf of Mexico. The middle is Lake Pontchartrain, and then we have Lake Maurepas on the left. Lake Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain are connected via Pass Manchac, which, if you can see my cursor, is this waterway right here. And Lake Pontchartrain, as many folks know, is not technically a lake. It is connected to the Gulf via a few things, but mainly the Wrigley's over on the east side. And for frame of reference for folks not super familiar with the size of the lake, this line kind of going in the middle is the Causeway Bridge, which is about 24 miles. So you can see that we do get a very significant fetch on this lake. The northeast side of the lake is the Tangipahoa Parish boundary, and that's where this project did focus. So, and then one other thing to note in general, so the land over here, where you can kind of see based off of the aerial, is not super developed. That is mostly wetlands. That is the Manchac Land Bridge. It is a vital component to the coastal defenses of Louisiana. the several layers of defense. If something were to happen to that over time through degradation and erosion, that could result in more flooding and more issues to the folks on the other side of that land bridge, because we do get storm surges in the lake coming from the Gulf side. So zoomed in version here. So we did talk about it is on the Manchac Land Bridge. Just kind of want to point out this white line is where the breakwater that was constructed in 2013 actually lies. Just want to kind of get you a little bit a little frame of reference of some of these nearby waterways, because this is going to be important. So this breakwater does go very near to the Tangipahoa River. We did have to kind of skip this first portion due to non-engineering related items. So we did skip that. We started it here and then we moved our way downward. The original design did go all the way to past Manchac, but there wasn't enough funds to build the full length in 2013. And then it does go down to past Manchac here at the south. Past Manchac does flow in both directions depending on tides and time of the day. So the land loss in this area, there's a lot of reasons for the land loss. I think most of the folks who work in Louisiana are pretty familiar with these. We just have our day-to-day wind generated waves and the energy that's hitting the coastline there. This area in particular has had cypress logging in the past that really degraded the land. They also, would basically essentially build straight inland waterways to move the logs, right? So then that reduced the integrity of the marsh as well. We do have coastal storms, as most of South Louisiana does, and then your typical land subsidence and sea level rise. So before this project, we were seeing about 5 to 14 feet per year of erosion, kind of depending on where you were on the shoreline. So the funding source for the first project, for the 2013 project, was from CAP, Coastal Impact Assistance Program. That was a grant that was awarded in 2009. Ultimately, 1.7 miles of breakwater was constructed for a cost of $5.5 million. And that construction was completed in 2013. And so folks that are familiar with the Best Restored Shores program, the project has to be in place for, I think, at least 3 years to basically kind of show what has been happening since. And then you can again see in this photo is from 2019, so 6 years post-construction, and you can see the amount of vegetative growth we have back there. So just to kind of set the stage, I do want to kind of talk about the original project goals when we designed this breakwater. So the goal was to slow or halt shoreline retreat by reducing wave impacts with a design life of 20 years. So there was no official goal to capture sediment or to accrete land or anything of that nature. We definitely knew that that was definitely a possibility, but it was outside of the scope of this project to design for that. So there was no sediment modeling or anything of that nature during design. But it was a hope, and but there wasn't a specific design aspect to try and do that. And then these photos here are both from the construction phase side. So you can really see how much water was behind the breakwater at the time of construction. And you can also see a lot of the stumps from the historic logging in this area. Yeah, so now we're going to go through, what have we seen over time? This is basically Google Earth photos that we've seen throughout the years. The thing on each of these photos, the black line is consistent. That's the line that we drew in to show you where the existing breakwater is. And so this photo here is from March 2013. So it's basically almost the end of construction. You can actually see the temporary stockpiles from the dredging for access there to the lake side of the project. And you can kind of just see how much water there is between the shoreline and the breakwater itself. So now we're going to move forward 2 years. So 2 years post-construction, we're already starting to see a significant amount of land build up behind the breakwater, directly adjacent to the breakwater. You can kind of see it's pretty large up here, and it's actually large down on this bend as well. but you will start to notice that we don't really have a lot at the end, and we, do imagine that's due to just kind of edge effects of the breakwater. But one other interesting aspect here is, if you can, I don't know if you can see it at this resolution, but you can kind of see these like plumes coming through each of the breakwater gaps. So we're starting to see that, sediment is coming in and starting to drop out and then moving within the system. So now jump forward another 2 years, May 2017. So you can see now there's a lot of land buildup. One thing to note, as kind of everyone's aware with aerials, we don't know necessarily the tides on when these photos were taken, but just as a qualitative review, this is definitely significantly more land here than it was 2 years prior. And then you continue to see where we have the gaps is where we're kind of essentially getting these tidal channels building. So this is the same photo as the last photo before on the previous slide. So up until 2017, we were getting natural land growth or sediment deposition. But then in the 2017-2018 timeframe, the parish worked with the Corps, and then I believe ELOS Environmental helped them as well to coordinate some dredging that the Corps was going to be doing in Tangipahoa River to try and place that material in a way that could help build this growth. And so you can see in this photo from January 2018, the Corps essentially just placed dredged material at the north end of this. You can actually see it's kind of in the front and in the back, just in this area in general. Overall, between two events in November 2017 and March 2018, they placed 100,000 cubic yards of material. And a lot of this data here is coming out of the Schaefer, Stevens, and Beachy report from 2019. That is a research group out of Southeastern Louisiana University. So after that dredging event, we still continue to see sedimentation. And so this is January 2018, so right after after one placement event. So then November 2019, we're continuing to see land growth, and we're seeing actually green, right? So we're getting some significant amounts of vegetation. And then November 2021, you can kind of see it's essentially connected to the land in a lot of locations here, especially towards the north. So overall, according to the Schaefer report, we did have a natural accretion of 47.4 acres, and then the dredge material placement contributed 23.8 acres. So overall, this was very successful in terms of Louisiana wanting land growth. And just as a note, and I think most folks are aware, in different parts of the country, this is not a good thing, right? So in some areas of the country, you don't want to see that connection from the breakwater to the land, but in Louisiana, this is generally a very positive thing. And so this just basically is a zoomed in view of the first picture from March 2013, right at the end of construction, to November 2021. And these are the same locations. And you can see that essentially it's just connected land at this point at the north end. So part of that report, they were looking at, the biological aspects of, what happened here. So definitely increased herbaceous and woody vegetation, as you can see visually. The number of fish overall decreased at the breakwater, but that was mainly due to it really being land and not water. So there, wasn't as much water for fish to be. But the fish that they did find, there was a diversity of fish species increased relative to the natural shoreline. And at the top photo, I do want to point, so we're getting this really good kind of tidal ecosystem now, because the gaps that were there for fish passage originally is letting that tidal water in. So it's getting tidal waters to that new wetland that is now behind the breakwaters. So then what we did is we looked at, what actually elevation data do we have, right? So we have 2010 data that we took during design of the original breakwater. We have data from 2013 that were essentially the record drawings. So it's really just of the breakwater itself. And then in 2019, we started design on the next phase of the project, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But as part of that, we basically reran the survey transects in 2019 to see what's going on. So we took 3 locations. You can see by the white lines here. We'll go one by one. So at the very north end, basically, the gray is from 2010. The orange is from 2013, and you'll see that the toe is actually lower in 2013 than 2010. That's just due to the erosion that happened between those years. And then blue is the 2019, 6 years post-construction. And we have about 4 foot of sediment depth here, which is great. And it does connect completely to the shoreline at this location. And you can also see that visually in the aerial. So now let's move down a little bit down here to the middle. You see the same thing, the 2010 to 2013, we did have erosion that we expected. We built the breakwater. At the breakwater, the sediment has essentially built up to the breakwater crest elevation with a little bit of freeboard. But it does go down, as we get further from the shoreline. One thing to note too here, you can kind of see by the placement of the breakwater in these two, at this location, the middle, we are further from the shoreline originally, right? So there is more distance between the breakwater and the shoreline to fill in overall. And we are further from that Tangipahoa River sediment source as well. And then finally, we're going to go to the last one down here. So you can see here, basically, we are essentially seeing continued erosion, likely due to the edge effect of it just being the end of the breakwater, and there's still wave energy coming behind it. So the blue being 2019 is actually lower than the gray, which is 2010. So we are seeing that continued erosion at the end. So what happened? So we'll caveat, this is qualitative analysis only. We were not scoped to do any sediment modeling like we talked about. We just kind of looked at all the data and looked at the research that was put out about this to see what happened. So the sediment source appears to primarily be the Tangipahoa River outflow. We can kind of see that from the buildup at the north relative to the south. But also, as many folks in the Louisiana area know, the Bonnie Carey Spillway has been opened over the years for at various points, and there was a question of, is the sediment coming from the Bonnie Carey opening? But we are thinking it is not. There was some research done. A research paper came out in 2021, and what it basically seemed to find is that the flow from past Man Shack going in and out kind of pushes the sediment away from this specific project site. So if any of the sediment is from the Bonnie Carey, we don't expect it to be a significant amount. So we do believe that the breakwater is, reducing the wave energy, which is the point of it. And with that reduced wave energy, it's allowing sediment to deposit in areas that maybe it wasn't depositing before. And then, as we did discuss, there are a lot of pre-existing stumps. You can see that in the photo at the bottom here. From all the historic logging, and below the water surface, what you can't see is a lot of woody debris in general, and we think that could be helping to trap that sediment as it does kind of start to settle. And then at the end of the day, the breakwater itself is functioning as a containment structure in a way, and keeping that sediment buildup there once it does deposit. And then, as most folks know, once we do start that cycle of vegetation growth and land, well, now that vegetation is starting to help stabilize the land, and then it's, continued cycle of more sediment capture, added biomass, and increasing, the elevation from there. And so, what we're really excited about on this project here is, when we build the breakwater, especially in Louisiana, with the rates of relative sea level rise that we have, over time, the function will be less, right? Because that breakwater crest elevation is going to lower relative to the water elevation over time. But now that we have this land buildup and this vegetative growth, there's a lot more opportunity for resiliency where, if we can protect that land enough that the vegetation can keep growing, adding biomass, it helps it in the fight to keep up with that relative sea level rise. So what's next? So as I mentioned before, we did start design on the next phase of this project. So just to kind of orient you here, at the top, we do have these existing breakwaters. You can see the land built up there. And this is actually that bottom existing breakwater that doesn't have much land built up. And then we will continue the breakwaters down south to past Man Shack. You will note a little bit of a weird formation here. That's just due to you know, we stopped the erosion where the breakwater was, but the erosion didn't stop elsewhere. So when we get in the field and the contractor does the first pre-construction surveys, we probably will have to kind of field fit and redesign that again. The design surveys for this project were taken in 2019, and so they are 4 years old at this point. So we'll have to be updating that once we get new information. And then the North Reach, we are actually going to also hop on over to the other side of the Tangipahoa River and start to move north. This phase of the project was actually designed all the way until the Tangipahoa St. Tammany Parish line. But what you're seeing here is actually the length that was awarded based off of the bids that came in just a couple of months ago. And the south reach will end up being 1.4 miles. This north reach will end up being 0.9 miles. And the funding for this, a few different sources, Go Mesa, Restore, both Restore Parish funds and a CPRA matching grant. And then also funds that the parish has brought together to make this a reality. This project is very important for the parish. So design challenges on this current project. So a lot of varying bathymetry. So here you see the Tangipahoa River. Existing breakwaters are here. Basically, the point of story here is the blue is deeper. Gray is on land to shallower. Where we get near past Manchac, it's a steep slope, quick, right? When we're over here north of the Tangipahoa River, it is a very gradual slope. And you can actually see that in the cross section here. So the blue is the South Reach phase one. Phase one is what we had called it at one point during the project. You see that real steep slope goes down, and then we're deep. Where at the north, relatively shallow, which could be good and bad depending on if you're looking for access or for where you want to place your breakwater. And then as we kind of have noted, trees and stumps are everywhere here. So for the design of this project, we took some high resolution drone aerial imagery, and then I identified all the visible debris. And basically the point just showing you here is it's kind of everywhere, So when we laid out the breakwater center line, we are doing our best to avoid the debris as much as possible. In some places that might not be possible, but that is why we're trying to kind of just make sure we identify where the debris is. And then the design challenges here as well, the geotechnical concerns. So the closer we get to past Manchac, the more difficult the soils became. So breakwater design for this new project. So the original project was basically just graded riprap on a geotextile composite, very simple. For the South Reach, which is closer to past Manchac, we do have more difficult soils and more difficult bathymetry. So we did have to go with a lightweight aggregate design. Nothing too special here, relative to other lightweight aggregate breakwaters, but we do have that core to kind of make the breakwater itself lighter. We have the graded riprap outer covering, and then we have a geotextile composite at the bottom. And then on the South Reach, it was aligned at the -2 foot contour. So we aligned it on a contour so that when we get those pre-construction surveys, when the contractor actually gets out there, it helps us relay out the breakwater quickly. And then the North Reach, so this is the area north of the Tangipahoa River. It's a much easier location with soils, so we just have more of a simple breakwater design, and it also has lower wave energy, so the crest height is a little bit lower as well, but very, just basically graded riprap on top of geotextile composite. So this is the plan view layout, and so some things we want to talk about. So in the South Reach, it's a more complicated breakwater cross section, but it's a lot easier to access. So we have much less access dredging, which is what this green is basically where they'll have to temporary impacts for dredging. The North Reach, you can see these access channels are very long, and that is due to the shallow slope of the bathymetry there. So even though the breakwater itself is simpler to construct, the access is more complicated at the North Reach. So what's next? So, we had this project before, which had all these, great benefits, and so we're trying to see, well, how applicable are those? How applicable is what happened at the first project to this new project? So, will the South Reach breakwaters collect any sediment from past Manchac? The past Manchac is a very different system than the Tangipahoa River, right? It flows in both directions. It has different flow dynamics, probably doesn't have the same sediment load as the Tangipahoa River. So how will that interact? Will the North Reach breakwaters near Tangipahoa River gain sediment in a similar pattern? So basically, if the breakwaters are near the river, how far out does that, sediment plume go out? Will it be able to catch anything from that river, or is all the sediment really just kind of flowing south at that location? And then will the sedimentation patterns vary? So basically, now essentially the land behind the breakwaters is blocking more sediment coming behind the breakwater. The sediment can still travel on the lake side of the breakwater, right? So what kind of sedimentation patterns are we going to see in the long term as we keep observing it? So lessons learned, basically design considering nearby natural sediment sources. So the Tangipahoa River was a huge player in the success of this project. So really understanding, where your nearby sources are, and then kind of like we alluded to, are there any partners we can work with for beneficial reuse opportunities like the Corps or anyone else that would need to be doing dredging for any activities. Consider the ability to contain sediment when selecting project material. So, this graded riprap did a great job of keeping that sediment in. If we did a different project with the intent of breaking waves that maybe didn't kind of create that containment, would we still have the same sediment buildup? And then, depending on the wave energy, maybe, try some different angles or semi-protection with the breakwater gaps, so we do have these large waterways that are coming into the gaps, and it's great for what it is here. But, if we do want to have more control or design over how big those waterways are, or, or maybe we can angle the gaps to better collect sediment. And then basically balancing the distance between the breakwater and the land, right? So you don't want the breakwater so far away that you're regenerating waves behind it, or that it's so far away that it's really not capturing sediment well. But you don't want it so close that if it does start to capture sediment, that you don't have any room for that sediment to grow, right? Because wherever you put the breakwater is essentially the maximum land growth you will get for all intents and purposes. And then, so here are the sources that we cited in the presentation. And that's everything.
Thank you very much, Aaron. That was awesome. I think maybe we should have given a best like a partial award to the Tangipahoa River to go along with your project award, because it seems like the river is a big winner in that project as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Anybody have any questions for Aaron? Don't forget you are muted, so please unmute yourself and ask the question. Or if you get nervous when you're asking questions like me, just drop it in the chat pod and I will take care of it.
Hey, great stuff, Aaron. This is Carl Sepulveda at Freeze and Nichols. So how far apart were the gaps, circulation gaps spaced?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was I think about 50 feet from crest to crest. So it was, when you get to the toes, less.
But how far along the breakwater? Yeah, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this one was 1,500 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and oh, good. Uh-huh.
Oh, I was gonna let you finish and then I'll follow up with another point.
Yeah, because those original spacings were really mostly influenced by NOAA nymphs.
Right.
and their requirements during permitting. So that's where that spacing originally came from back then.
Yes. So I've been observing some breakwaters down. I'm in Texas here, and I've been observing some breakwaters over in McFadden Wildlife Refuge, just over the state line. And there is a section of breakwaters earlier that had no gaps, and then just one adjacent to it that started introducing some gaps. I don't know if it's on 1,500 or 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 foot spacing, but the ungapped one definitely had a much faster accretion rate behind it. And then the gapped one is having some accretion, but it's far slower. So I was always, I always, and it's a porous breakwater, and it's along the GIWW, so it has, barge traffic that helps provide some sediment mobility in that narrow waterway. So yeah, the sediment regime is a bit different, but I wonder if being able to have it closed for some time and then having a provision to, open up fish dips along the way, would help accrete things faster. But it looks like you had some pretty good accretion despite you having gaps. Do you have a feel for how far away from those gaps you don't see accretion?
Yeah, I think it really varies along the breakwater. Let me see if I can find a good aerial to let's see. Yeah, so you can kind of see over time, really going from, here we go, this is a good aerial. So from north to south, so originally there was, like, let's call it edge effects by the gaps, right? Where it was building up in the center of each breakwater. And then eventually the sediment load behind the gap kind of, I won't say like overwhelmed it, right? But connected.
Okay.
And then it kind of becomes its own thing. And that's kind of happening right now, like north to south, right? So you can see here, it's essentially closed up here. And then now it's starting to fill in back here. This is a gap here. I don't know if you can kind of see that at this scale. So it's kind of filling in, and then here's a big gap, right? And so we would expect, like I said, all of this is qualitative. We did not do any sediment modeling. That, if this continues down in the same pattern, eventually this would end up closing. This one kind of already a little bit closed up here. You can kind of see behind the gap. So, yeah, and down here, there's almost no buildup. So
Sure.
I don't know if we really have a real specific answer. It's kind of just
No.
a work in progress. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And last question, and all I promise.
Yeah,
Stone
great.
size. What was the stone size in your
Yeah, I think this one was a 250 pound. The
Okay.
new project is 250 pound. I think it was the same on the old one.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. And I can't see the chat, Brett, so I don't know if anyone is
There's
checking.
nobody in the chat yet,
Okay.
but thanks, Carl, for the question. That was great questions. While people are maybe thinking about asking another one, on a related note, Aaron, now maybe with the benefit of hindsight, but thinking about potential sediment delivery pathways from the Tangipahoa, going back, like if you could redo it all over again, working with the Corps to dispose of that material, would disposing it at the north end and basically sealing off that opening, like still make sense, or would you maybe target placement in a different place now that you know the sediment delivery pathways?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we wanted to spread it out better, it could be good to maybe target like in the middle, right? Because the north was still, I mean, even before the dredge material placement was getting a sediment source from the river, is what we're assuming. Maybe kind of spread it out. But if you look at the sedimentation pattern like before the placement, we do see sedimentation. Yes, this is before the placement. I mean, we see sedimentation, throughout the whole thing. So, I mean, I would say maybe don't close off the north yet, but maybe kind of target somewhere in the middle. But I mean, either way, I think it's done a great job. So hopefully we can build more breakwater, and then they can, you know, place it a little bit further south, if they do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the places where it's got complete connectivity. It's maybe over time the breakwater becomes more of like a tow revetment or something
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that.
that's functionally what's happened up here. You know, like I don't get into land rights, but someone's mowing the lawn, like literally,
Oh,
like
geez.
yeah, up to the breakwater up at the north. So, you know, I'm not getting involved with that
Yeah, no, there should be a provision though. Just don't mow the native vegetation.
Yeah, yeah.
So there are a couple questions in the chat pod.
Okay.
One is, will anyone be doing a monitoring program in the shoreline areas after construction? I assume that's for the next phase 1 and phase 2 projects.
Yeah, so there's no money for it. So that's the unfortunate answer. All the work that, you know, we did get these data is from a research group at Southeastern Louisiana University. So you know, we are hoping that maybe we can talk with the parish and see if you know, some master student wants a project or something. But unfortunately there is no funding for it. So I think that's the biggest issue. All the analysis, analysis in quote words, right? I mean, you saw the level of analysis we did, but here was really from Google imagery and then some basic information we could find from some folks who did related research. But it would be great to have actual research on this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then second question was, what do you recall what the rock unit price and sand unit prices were like installed?
Yeah. Back in 2013, well, so I don't know. I don't remember what the unit price was, but I know it was 5.5 million for 1.7 miles, which is not what it would cost today. So,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously, but yeah, so and then we didn't actually place any sediment. So, well, we didn't pay for any. So the Army Corps work, HDR was not like directly involved with. So I am not familiar with the funding mechanism for that. I don't know if it was just that they just deposited it for free or if there was any agreement in terms of financials.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sure those prices have changed quite a bit in a decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another question. Did you observe any increased or decreased erosion activity in the vicinity of the Tangipahoa River near the north end of the breakwaters?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did not survey it. So we don't have any elevation surveys to review on that front. I mean, the best I could say is we could probably just visually look here, you know. There are some non-engineering related items that we can't, you know, issues that we can't build up there. So we really just didn't dig into it too much.
Good deal. Oh, wow. Lots of questions coming in now. You're in
Okay.
trouble, Aaron.
Uh-oh.
How significant were the permitting efforts for the breakwaters? And was there any potential for adverse downdrift impacts?
Yeah, so I mean, in permitting, you know, the downdrift impacts were not really you know, it didn't come up as an issue during permitting. Um I wasn't involved in the original permitting for the original project, but you know, I didn't hear any horror stories, so I guess it was okay.
Yeah.
The permitting for this new project, you know, actually our biggest delay was really just related to cultural resource stuff. So not really anything related to downdrift impacts or engineering side of things. Yeah. I mean, they you know, they did want to know, like, you know, could the land still drain and, you know, all your typical things, but nothing you know, super related to the sediment downdrift impacts. Yeah.
All right. Another follow-up question from Carl. Kind of a statement followed by a question. Carl said, "There's a closed, ungapped breakwater in front of the Manchac WMA that accreted pretty well without openings, other than the porous breakwater itself. Was there any thought process to leaving the ends open in the breakwater versus this approach?"
If it's the project I'm thinking of, I think they placed sediment back there after they closed it. I'm not familiar enough to say that for sure, but I know originally I think that breakwater was like gapped, and then I think they closed it off and then placed sediment, but I don't know that for sure, so don't quote me on that. Yeah. But to answer your question, no, there was no, we didn't consider a design that would actually connect the rock to the existing shoreline.
All right, another question. Do you have any information on the nature of the infill behind the breakwaters, like in terms of organics, sediment size? Did it potentially come from the lake bed, et cetera? And then any ideas about how often or whether or not the breakwaters have been overtopped, potentially maybe some deposition through storm activity?
Yeah, those are all definitely possibilities, but to answer your question, no. We didn't have any funding for borings or sediment sampling in that location. So and that's why I want to just 100% say this is a qualitative analysis that we're trying to see, but those are definitely options or possibilities of where the sediment is coming from. Absolutely.
Somewhat of on a related note, another participant asked if you recalled the height of the breakwaters above mean high or high water or some other tidal datum.
Yeah, I believe it was about on the order of like +3 NAVD. So, something similar. I think mean higher high water is going off of memory. I think it's somewhere in the 0.5 to 1 range. I might have made that up, but I think it's something of that nature. So they're definitely out of the water. They're not in the tidal zone in terms of elevation. Yeah.
And another question kind of again was thinking about the potential for other transport mechanisms in addition to maybe sediment moving behind them from Tangipahoa or over them during overtopping for that first original breakwater design just being graded riprap. What do you think about the potential for sediment actually passing through the breakwaters and it being retained on the backside?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a possibility. We have seen this general deposition pattern before where not just on this project, on other projects where there's not like a river nearby, where we see kind of sediment deposition on the landward toe. So that is a definite possibility for sure. And one other thing we're curious about, so on the new breakwater on the South Reach, we will have that lightweight aggregate core. So which makes the breakwater a little bit less permeable, right? So we're curious to see if that has any effect on the process or pattern we're seeing.
Yeah, it's almost like you should ask for money to monitor that.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any grad students that want to do
Oh,
a
that'd be a
research
long
project.
that'd be a long drive. That'd be a
Yeah, work with
drive.
Southeastern.
Hey, we're doing year-round living shorelines monitoring right now in Alabama, but that'd be difficult to implement.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, I mean, this area is a great area for research. We just don't have any funding for that, so
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Yeah, that's always a weakness of, we're not a weakness, but an unfortunate reality of all these projects is that there's just no dedicated money for the monitoring, which is a shame because you can learn a lot from these projects with a fairly limited investment and resources to get some pre and post construction and maybe 1 or 2 years out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, Aaron, you really got hammered pretty hard with the questions.
Oh, it's fine. I just keep saying qualitative analysis, which is what it is. Yeah, we don't want to pretend like we've done more than we have on this.
But I will say, I mean, to that point though, I would like to reiterate for the people on the call or on the Zoom that you don't need a lot of quantitative data to win a Best Restored Shore Award. So the nominations for Best Restored Shore Awards are now open year round. And so you can submit your project or a project that you know of, and we can evaluate it next year. And so we cut off at some point next year around summertime, we'll kind of cut off applications. Not really, because we take them year round, but we'll take the ones that we have in the group at the time that the evaluation process starts, which is around midsummer. And we'll work on those. And then anything that comes in after that, we'll just kick to the next year. So you don't have to have a ton of real fancy monitoring data to tell your story and to win a Best Restored Shore Award. So please consider submitting for next year's awards program.
Great.
I'm going to do this as the final